Hello, my beautiful friends, my fellow space blobs or sparkly blobs or whatever form you want to take. You don't have to be a blob. I know some of you do not relate to the blobness, but if you do, I love it. And I know I feel like more of a space blob than ever before in my life, and that is a very freeing and liberating experience. So I'm feeling pretty good right now, and this is going to be a somewhat impromptu chat. We're going to talk about Pluto in Aquarius. I wasn't planning to have this conversation originally because I feel like there's so much out there talking about it, the bigness of it, how important it is. But as I keep doing this work, and this is my 8th year here in this space and sharing my work and evolving and growing and understanding things in new ways, the less I am impressed by some of these more drama-seeking ways of exploring transits, poetry. For me, all of these things have nothing to do with just being predictive, of just telling our future and setting things in stone. I think it's so much more important that we ask about what we are bringing to these conversations, what creativity we are bringing to the way that we change as a collective, as individuals, in different cultures, in different paths in life. We are all so unique and different, and each of us is experiencing our lives in our own unique ways, our own unique lenses. And the more that we can get into this idea of like, what do we want to bring to some of these poetic transits, some of these archetypes, some of these larger arcs of time, like 20 years that we are going to be talking about here with Pluto and Aquarius, the better. So today is going to be all about some of the things that I think are really helpful when exploring Pluto and Aquarius. I will leave the dates for all of that in the description because we don't need to get into all the technicalities, but what you can know is that Pluto just moved into Aquarius and that we are pretty much in that version of the world now. And maybe you've been feeling it, maybe you've been feeling some of that new magic, some of that new creativity coming in. And today we're just gonna set ourselves up to feel a little bit more clear and grounded in what all of this means and what some of this symbolism is all about. I was initially inspired to sit down and do this little chat about Pluto and Aquarius because I was thinking about how many ominous messages are floating around about Pluto in Aquarius. I feel like the drama that comes whenever anybody's bringing up Pluto, whenever we're talking about Aquarius, it's so intense and it makes me really tired. I don't like how it feels when I read messages like that, and I don't feel like it's the truest thing. And that's not to say every practitioner is saying that. I think there are plenty of nuanced people writing beautiful things about this time. But I think for me, it's just a really nice moment to reclaim my independent thought when it comes to my journey with Pluto and Aquarius, how I'm connecting with that, with the collective. So often Pluto gets put in this kind of box of drama. People are intimidated by it, scared of it because it has to do with the underworld and transformation. But for me, Pluto is really the core of what it means to be a human. Each and every one of us has to kind of face into ourselves multiple times throughout our lives and figure out who's really there and how do we show up and how do we create once we've faced ourselves, once we've faced a dark season, or once we've faced a truth about ourselves, or once we've learned to understand ourselves in new and beautiful ways. That's where our empowerment and the richness of life comes from. It's a really enlivening and powerful and central part of being human. So for me, this is just innate. It doesn't even really matter. Pluto can be anywhere. Pluto's always going to be there. That element of change, of understanding ourselves, of growth and becoming. And Pluto and Aquarius is going to be a lot about reclaiming our creative ability to be in this life through the mystery, through the not knowing, through the seasons that are very painful, and that we're not alone in that this is innately human and we get to share that together. But just that first note for me is that I want all of us to feel like we can walk into this next 20-year cycle in peace, that we don't have to fear it. That we don't have to fear repercussions or replays of the past as well. I think a lot of times you'll hear conversations about the French Revolution with Pluto and Aquarius because that was the last time Pluto was in Aquarius. I think that's really sloppy work when people do those simplistic comparisons because no single time is exactly the same. Each moment in time is unique. And while we can learn from the past, we aren't in 1792. We aren't in 1789. We aren't in 1880. We're here. We're in this moment. And I know time is a construct. That's a whole other topic. However, it's okay for us to kind of envision some new and different things. And we don't have to worry about things replaying the same completely. They aren't the same. And we're going to be exploring what that means and what that looks like in the coming years. And we'll all find out together. And now I'm going to share some of my thoughts that I've just been having about Pluto and Aquarius, some things that I think are really helping me to explore it and play with it and see what's coming up for me. These aren't necessarily predictions or ways you have to work with it. I want to point that out. This is not about telling you how to think about Pluto and Aquarius, since I just told you, don't let other people tell you. But they are, I think, fun ways to explore if you're looking for a little bit of support and ways to maybe step into this season and feel through it a little bit. So the first thing I was thinking about was breaking my own internal rules. I think so many of us move through life and we have some heavy, harsh, even mean-spirited at times internal rules about how we have to look, how we have to behave, how we have to live a life, how we have to uphold a certain standard. And I think this is a really beautiful moment here as we're kind of adjusting to this new cycle and this new archetypal meetup of Pluto and Aquarius to just explore the rules that we have inside. How are they feeling? Are they feeling helpful? Are they feeling heavy? Are we ready to rearrange some of those rules and start to free up some space and explore the ways that we can maybe step outside of those rules, break those rules, be a little bit of a rebel within our own expectations of ourselves? I think that's a really fun place to explore. The next thing, and I think this is just the heart of anything when we're working with Aquarian energy, is that try something different, and not different in the prescribed way of culture. You're different. And a lot of times when we're really exploring how we want to live a life that is true to us, it means that we're going to have to do some things that are a little uncomfortable because we've been told that this version of different, it makes other people uncomfortable or isn't allowed or is embarrassing. It may not always be pretty. It may not always be Instagram worthy. It may not always be something that we want to share with the rest of the world. But whatever that different is for you, this is a really wonderful time to explore. I know I am moving through a really big season of that, and I'm honestly looking forward to being able to talk more openly about some of that process, but right now I'm working through it in my own way behind the scenes and doing that in a sustainable way. And I'm really excited to share some of the ways that I'm experiencing that. But, you can't always look in the easy and obvious places to live a life that feels like your own unique way. A lot of times it's going to be in the places that are a little less obvious, the places that we don't always look to feel like our truest selves, the little subtle moments in our quiet lives that aren't seen by the public, that may not have to do with how we express in our clothing outside. That's also a great way, though, to explore who we are. But it might not be always in the obvious ways of thinking about difference and thinking about being different and thinking about letting ourselves do that. I think when I think about people in belonging and humanitarianism and all these things that we think about when we're working with Aquarian energy, I think one of the best things we can do for humanity and the collective is find belonging in ourselves. And we do that by exploring and playing and experimenting with our own journey. And that leads me to the next theme, which is really similar but slightly different, which is letting go of trying to squeeze into the status quo. One of the most painful things that this world is experiencing is trying to squeeze into status quo all the time. It's created a lot of backlash and kind of a bit of a destructive backlash to having to fit into status quo. It makes me think of one of my favorite writers, thinkers, speakers, beings, Alok. If you have not discovered Alok, I suggest you do. Alok. This is what Alok said, and I love this statement from Alok. Who knows what the future holds? We should not hold ourselves back for the sake of convention. Instead, we should embrace ongoing transformation as a necessary part of what it means to be alive. And I love that. I think that so many of us feel like we have to hold back. We have to keep a status quo. We have to keep up appearances. We have to keep forging forward and keeping it looking like we've got it all together. And I think that there's so much freedom in, it goes back to breaking those internal rules. What status quo is actually feeling heavy is starting to cause detriment to our mental health, our physical health. What status quo, what expectations aren't working for you anymore? What would it happen if we just let some of the more authentic feelings inside of us live in our mundane lives? Live in the Monday morning that we're having, live in the Saturday night that we want to have. How would that change the way that we feel we belong in the world? And how would that help so many of us who are hurting, trying to keep up status quo, feel freedom? And I think that'll be a longer process, right? Figuring out what that even looks like for each of us, figuring out how to bring it into the mundane, figuring out how to bring it into an afternoon at a job. Maybe you're ready to leave. How do we do that? What does that look like? That's a topic for another day, probably. I would love to get more into how to bring some of that transformation, the rule breaking, stepping out of status quo into our mundane lives, because it's subtle and it's more doable. And I think we often realize it's not always just about sticking it to your boss or, breaking up with everybody and throwing everything on the fire. A lot of times it's going to be these subtle moments of recognition and sticking with ourselves that really bring about power. But letting go of fitting into the status quo. How can we do that? Do we let ourselves do that? Are we feeling pressure to hold a certain shape? What is that shape? Why is it there? Why do we feel we have to keep it going forever? Is it really keeping us safe? Is it really doing the most justice to our communities and to our families and to ourselves? Is it really doing the job it purports to be doing? And if not, what would happen if we let go of that? What would happen if we let a little bit more of that wild freedom into our mundane? And finally, it wouldn't be a Pluto and Aquarius conversation without addressing this whole idea of technology, because Aquarius is connected to concepts of technology. And a lot of times we'll hear conversations about AI and intensity in technology and the consequences of all of that when we're talking about this kind of Pluto and Aquarius time. So I wanted to make sure to just kind of bring it up. First of all, I wanted to mention, with technology, there's sometimes this kind of, I think with thinking about technology, this idea of determinism that goes into it. Technology is just developing in this straight line and it's got this logical endpoint where we've just been going toward it for 500 years and it's been obvious the whole time and this is how it's going to go. And that is a very deterministic and even manifest destiny type of perspective on change, growth, and the humanitarian journey that we're all on. So right away, I just want to take that off the table. There is no clear-cut, obvious, this is just how it's going to have to go formula for the way any of this is going to look. And I think a lot of times we will feel this powerlessness, like we're on a railroad track and this is just where it's headed. And there's nothing we can do. And oh well, I guess I just have to ride through the destruction and the intensity of this kind of sci-fi novel dystopia with all of these big questions rolling around. But the reality is, of course, that technology, like all creative things, is always moving and undulating and changing and growing. We don't know exactly what that's going to look like. And once again, the more I think that we are willing to step in and be creative with that and explore that and ask questions, the better. And I think this is a really great time to just ask questions about how you want to connect with technology. What does that look like for you? I know I have been reconsidering some of the ways that technology has been affecting me and what I want my relationship to be like with technology. Aquarius is an air sign, which means it's got this duality to it. It's both that detached, technological, innovative, seeing into the future energy, which I think is beautiful, by the way. And it's the deep heart of being alive as an organic human being. And so part of our job and our work whenever we're working with Aquarius is figuring out the conversation between these parts and finding out what works for each of us. And once again, we as individuals can't decide the fate of humanity, but we can be engaged with our own process. So just defining what we want technology to look like in our lives, and also remembering technology, yes, it's computers and AI and all of that, but technology also appears in so many other forms as well. It can be about different understandings and research that involves so many different topics. It doesn't just have to be about how we're plugged into computers and the internet and things like that. So just like opening our mind to what that can look like as well and exploring and playing with that. So those were some of my thoughts. There's so much more we could talk about on this topic. There's a lot there, and I feel like I just scratched the surface. It was a little challenging to condense down some of the themes for this new kind of generational cycle that we're entering. So this was just an attempt to kind of create a little bit of a warm, soft spot. What I am doing over on my Patreon is I'm creating some journaling questions for all 12 signs. And I'm doing it based on rising sign and where that puts Aquarius in your chart. But there are just some like nice writing prompts if you would like to join in on that. I will be offering that to all of my paid patrons over on Patreon if you want some support. I'm also planning and starting to create my tarot series over there, which I'll be starting very shortly in the coming weeks. I am going to be starting that journey. If you've been wanting to learn tarot through my perspective and some of the softer, subtler ways I work with it, I would love to see you there. It's going to be really about encouraging each of us to develop our own sense of knowing and working with it, and to feel a little bit free to break some of the rules about the status quo when it comes to tarot. So I'd love to see you in that space. That's where I'm really offering up a lot. And it also helps me continue to do this work here. So when you join over there, you really help me continue to be a presence here. And of course, if you're here, how are you feeling about Pluto and Aquarius? Do you have questions about Pluto and Aquarius? Leave your questions. I'm happy to come back to this topic again at some point and see how we're all doing with it. Have you been feeling stressed about it, or have you been feeling excited? I know for me, I've had a lot of new creative insights and things coming up that have been really exciting. So let me know how you're doing. Leave a comment. Let me know. Subscribe if you have not yet, so that you don't miss any of these little impromptu chats. I will see you all very soon for our next conversation. We have Lunar New Year coming up very soon with a new moon in Aquarius. So the Aquarius conversations are going to keep going, and I'm sending you all my love.